Before we get into the top NFL free agents that I want the Raiders to sign after roster cuts, I got to be honest with you. I originally filmed this video with the top 10 free agents, and when I filmed it, all 10 were available. Unfortunately, one of the players, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, did get signed to an NFL team. Today, we're looking at the top 10 free agents that the Las Vegas Raiders could sign after NFL roster cuts. I'm Mitchell Renz, host of the Raiders Report, and I have the top 10 free agents ranked 10 all the way down to 1. As it stands right now, the Las Vegas Raiders, they got some money to go out there to go and sign some players, and I think that people have been waiting for Antonio Pierce Tom Telesco to do something. But I got to know, man, okay? I know this, that if the Raiders sign a player, I'm going live here. But I got to know, are you going to be a real one, and are you pulling up here when breaking news happens? If you are, spam me down below, because if the Raiders sign any of the players that I'm about to talk to, I don't care if they're ranked at 10, I don't care if they're ranked at 9. If they ranked at number 1, we're blowing the roof off this joint if they end up signing. But the bottom line is this. I go live for the nation, but I'm going to bring the energy. The question is, are y'all going to be able to bring that energy as well? Only one way to find out. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you got those notifications turned on. So the Las Vegas Raiders, as it stands right now, have about $27.4 million in salary cap space. That is the 5th most in the National Football League. Obviously, the Silver and Black had to trim their roster from 91. They got it all the way down to 53 here. And if they do end up moving on from, or if they end up signing any of the players that we talk about today, you're going to have to cut somebody. So not an easy decision to make. And all the players that I talk about here, I would imagine that they would end up putting on the actual roster. But because there is at least one practice squad spot available left, like maybe that one of these players they would sign gets put on the practice squad. I'd be surprised, but I'm just saying it is technically a possibility. So let's go to number 10 here. I got Yannick Ngakoue, and Ngakoue was somebody that I've gotten some recent information that he's not 100% healthy, which does make me pause here a little bit. I'll also say that I put him on the list because he does already have that connection with Max Crosby, knows some of the former players that the Raiders have here. And Crosby, I'm telling you right now, would vouch for Ngakoue to be a member of this team. The Raiders need some extra edge rush help because Tyree Wilson seems a little bit lackluster right now. I liked what I seen from Janarius Robinson, but we really only have 3 edge rushers that I believe in, and Janarius Robinson is one of them. I think you got to probably kick Tyree Wilson onto the inside. But for a guy like Ngakoue, he was a member of the team back in 2021. When he's healthy, he can be a third down, pin your ears back, and get after the quarterback, and that's all I need for him. If that's his job where he can come in on third down, and if he gets somewhere close to 250 snaps on the season, I think for what you'd have to pay him, it would be a viable option overall. But again, he's got to be healthy. If he's not healthy, this simply doesn't make any sense. Let's go to number 9 here on my list, and it is Tyler Hall. I'll admit, since the Raiders went out and got Darnay Holmes, I don't know how likely it is that they would also sign a corner like Tyler Hall who would play essentially only on the inside. He was released by the Eagles last week, even before roster cuts happened, and he played in 11 games for the Raiders back in 2023. When he's healthy, he's a good, cheap, reliable player that I think is maybe, if the Raiders were to sign any of these guys and put on the practice squad, the name's probably Tyler Hall. But the PFF grades last season, a 72.7 overall grade, coverage grade is 71.9. And I know, Amik Robertson is the name that we've thrown out there a lot because Amik was a tenacious player that brought a lot of energy, brought a lot of fire. That's what kind of Tyler Hall is. Tyler Hall, to me, is very, very similar to a player like what you would get with an Amik Robertson out there. Now, we still have tons of names to get to here, but, we still got to be able to look ourselves in the mirror and say that there's still some needs that the Raiders have on the offensive side of the football and on the defensive side of the football. So this is going to be the pinned comment here on today's Raiders Report show. What is the biggest need for AP, for Tom Telesco's club? My answer after this YouTube ad break. The biggest need right now outside of the quarterback position, because it's going to be Gardner or it's going to be Aiden, I would say then the next biggest need that we have that does scare me is having that other outside reliable cornerback. I like Jack Jones. I like Nate Hobbs, but there is still a question mark of who that other corner is going to be. think edge rusher is another position that you got to talk about. Running back you could consider, but I don't think that running back is as big of a need as those other positions that I just mentioned. Let's go now to a guy, Lawrence guy, that is, defensive tackle, and familiar name from the previous 2 years just because he was a former Patriot, had some ties in with McDaniels and Ziegler, but I don't want people to see the Patriots jersey and be like, no way. Lawrence guy could help out this team. I know he's 34 years old, but he's only missed 3 games the past 3 seasons, 7 straight seasons with at least 38 tackles, and he does create some of this like versatility from a defensive tackle, defensive end standpoint. The older and older he's gotten, the more and more teams have just put him onto the inside. I know the PFF grades were not fantastic last season. Arizona State grad is, I think, maybe another like little tip of the cap. No connections with AP. But like, when you look at what some of the things that the Raiders need, I know they just went out and they got Jonah Lalu. Lawrence guy at age 34, though, could be that good veteran, could be just another player that you'd be able to add for extra rotational depth there at the defensive line. At number 7 here, I'm going to go with Ahkello Witherspoon. Long, lanky, could be a potentially good replacement for Brandon Faison, who earlier in the week was placed on IR. And then yesterday, or I shouldn't say yesterday, 2 days ago, the Raiders ended up getting an injury settlement with Faison, so he's no longer a member of this team. If you want to be able to invest the cheap contract like you were paying Faison and you want to invest it into a veteran corner, I think Witherspoon could be an interesting option there. Started all 17 games last season for the Rams, 7 interceptions in his last 30 games. And if you want a cornerback 4 where he's probably going to go out there, he's going to battle it out with Jacory and Bennett. If Bennett's better, you go with Bennett. If not, you go with Witherspoon. That would be the role that he would play. He gets tested often. He's an aggressive player, but I think because he's an aggressive player, and if you think that the Raiders' defensive line is going to be a good one and that they're going to be able to get pressure, which I'm hoping for, right? Fingers crossed they're going to be able to get pressure when they bring 4. Ahkello Witherspoon is a high upside option, I think, for the Raiders that you could get at a little bit of a cheap price. Let's go to number 6 here. Not as high of an option in terms of upside. I actually think this is one of the safer moves the Raiders could do, signing Patrick Peterson. He played corner and safety last season with the Pittsburgh Steelers when Minkah Fitzpatrick ended up going down. Gerald Alexander is the Raiders safety coach. He was the safety coach last season for Pittsburgh. Antonio Pierce spoke to the media last week about how important having veterans in general is, especially in the cornerback room. And Peterson, that's what he's going to be able to bring you. He's going to be able to bring you that hybrid strong safety cornerback role. And if the Raiders want to transition Isaiah Pola-Mao more as an inside corner, which is something that they started to do near the end of training camp, and then you want to find somebody that can almost take like Isaiah Pola-Mao's role as a strong safety, maybe cornerback option. Again, versatility in this hybrid role. I actually think that Patrick Peterson is a fun and intriguing option there. Again, not breaking the bank here on any of these players yet. Quite frankly, I think the only player that you're going to have to pay a lot is probably the guy that's coming up here at number 1. We got plenty of players to still talk about here, but also this is probably the last week. It is the last week. It's actually guaranteed it's the last week. They have an opportunity to get some tickets to our free event here. Chatsports.com/week1. We're going to be at the Back Then Bar and Grill. When I say we, Jeremy, Chuggs, and I, and tons of other Raiders fans. There's going to be some super fans there. Special guest appearance. That's all I'm going to tell you. Chatsports.com/week1. That link is how you get the free tickets. It is a family-friendly event. You can bring your kids. You can bring your wife. If you can bring grandma. Hell, bring grandpa too. Bring the entire family. It's going to be an entire family event. All I ask is make sure that you're rocking your silver and black. If you're going to bring a Chargers fan, hey, I can't help what happens to them. That's all I'm going to say. They're going to have an event Saturday night at Topgolf. So if you're in the Cary, Raleigh, North Carolina area, I've been saying for months, if you don't go out to SoFi, this is where you need to be. This is going to be the biggest Raiders party on the East Coast. That I can guarantee you. Enter to win a raffle to play Topgolf with Chuggs and I Saturday night. Then we got the watch party on Sunday, September 7th, September 8th. If you got nothing going on, chatsports.com/Topgolf, chatsports.com/week1. Both links in the comments and the description of today's show. Let's go to number 5 here for Raiders free agent targets after roster cuts. I'm going to go with Rasheem Green. And Green is, I guess, the top edge rusher, top defensive end on the market. Like, it's not great. I will admit that I don't think that he was used correctly in Chicago last season, and the Bears are a football team, much like I was going to say earlier about Lawrence Guy, like the Patriots. There were so many bad things going on last season that I think it really took a lot out of some of these veteran players. And I know Green's actually not that old. He's actually been in the league for quite a few seasons, but like still only, I want to say 26, 27 years old, 6'4", 280 pounds, had 10 sacks from 2021 to 2022. Didn't play all that well last season, but what do we need? I need more depth at defensive end. If you're not going to keep Charles Snowden, which quite frankly, I would actually bump Charles Snowden up to the active roster, kick Tyree Wilson onto the interior. That's not much of a secret. We need more players. We need more depth just in case something happens to Crosby, Malcolm Koonce, or Janarius Robinson. Coming in here at number 4, and I'm not thrilled about how high I have him ranked, but I do think that defensive tackle is still a little bit of a need here for Las Vegas. Siaki Ika didn't make the Browns' 53-man roster, was selected in the 3rd round of the 2023 NFL Draft, and I'm not surprised that he was released simply because Cleveland does have a lot of defensive tackle depth. They have good defensive linemen. I was shocked, though, that nobody claimed him on the waivers, but he's a slightly better version than Byron Young. And if Byron Young was good enough initially to make the 53, I get it. He's now with the Philadelphia Eagles, no longer here. But, like, Ika is a better run defender than Byron Young was. And I know the fact that the Raiders just went out and got, again, Jonah Lalu. But could this be another player where could you go out, get Ika, potentially put him on your practice squad, that final spot, and see if your coaching staff can make it happen? Because at 6'3", 335 pounds, when he was first coming out of Baylor, it was a player that I scouted pretty closely just because of how close and relative we are to Baylor University here at Chat Sports. But, like, if you believe in Rob Leonard, the Raiders defensive line coach, which I do, if you believe in Patrick Graham, which I do, if you believe in Antonio Pierce, then I think that you should believe in the idea of going out and getting a player like Siaki Ika. Let's go to number 3, and I know for a fact this is going to be the highest that I have him on a list. And some of you are probably like, who the heck is Adam Gotsis, right? And I hear you. He's a defensive end, defensive tackle, versatile hybrid of a style player, 31 years old, but he also has some experience with, and he didn't play standing up really ever, but the fact that Caldwell, the Raiders linebacker coach, he was with Jacksonville last season, it's just an extra little bit of some familiarity there. 54 starts, 121 games played since 2016, and he's been relatively a healthy player overall. Solid veteran who can provide that extra depth at both defensive end and at defensive tackle, and you're not going to have to pay him a lot of money. Played pretty well last season for Jacksonville, and it's not a sexy name, right? Like, let's be honest here. It's not. But at this point in the offseason, I'm looking for a player that's going to show up, loves football, is going to be ready to go, and that's what Gotsis is. Let's go to number 2, though, because this is really where I think there's just big tier breaks of I would freak the F out if the Raiders went out and got Adoree Jackson. I'm going to freak out if the Raiders get the number 1 player on my list. But Jackson has some Patrick Graham experience, and he had a career year with him in 2021. And I almost wonder if the Raiders went out and got Darnay Holmes, who, again, Darnay Holmes, I did not know this, had connections with Antonio Pierce, where Holmes was actually, he said he knew AP, or AP said he knew Holmes back when he was 13 years old, and that was the extra connection there. But Holmes played with, Adoree Jackson. Yes, Jackson has dealt with some injuries. Wasn't all that great last season, but that was another player that I think just being in that situation, Jackson was not happy to be a member of the New York Giants, and I don't really blame him. He's got that inside-out versatility that this defense is looking for. USC guy, West Coast dude. I think Adoree Jackson would be a fun pick here. And again, yes, he's going to have injury concerns, but if you were to give him a contract where it's like 1 year worth up to $6 million in incentives, I know that sounds like a lot of money, but I would put it as 1 year. Maybe you give him $2.5 million. If he's healthy, Adoree Jackson could be a damn good player. But coming in here at number 1, and this would be the dude that would break the bank. When I say break the bank, I would say he'd get a deal just under what a player like Stephon Gilmore probably got from the Minnesota Vikings. It's Xavien Howard. He has worked with Patrick Graham, Rob Leonard, and Gerald Alexander. He had 15 interceptions in the 2 years when Gerald Alexander was the DB coach down in Miami. Medically cleared before the NFL draft, which the knock on him is always, can he stay healthy? Has at least 13 games in the last 4 seasons. Did some weird stuff this offseason, and if you don't know the Xavien Howard story, you can look it up. It's a weird story of what he did sending pictures, and he didn't send pictures of himself. All I'm going to say is he sent some pictures, and it's a little bit questionable. He can make plays on the football. He's an aggressive player, and I think when you look at the connection that he has with players, with coaches, him being aggressive, him being a veteran corner, if the Raiders want to go out and they want to add somebody that can make a legit difference to this team, Xavien Howard is the answer there. So, who did I leave off my list of the top free agents that the Raiders should go out and potentially look at? I looked at some of the waiver claims. I looked at some of the players that were released. This still seemed like a good list overall, but I also wanted to be able to make this show to illustrate the people that, like, realistically, there's not a lot of slam dunk talent that you could go out and get super fired up about. Now, there's some okay names. The biggest name on here, and it's not close, is Xavien Howard. It is also Adoree Jackson. The Raiders have a need at corner. The Raiders have a need at edge. The Raiders are in need of a quarterback, but I'm not going to put Ryan Tannehill on this list because Ryan Tannehill's not better than Gardner Minshew. And if you're not going to be able to find a quarterback that's better than the guy you already got, I'm not going to go out there and I'm going to do anything. If you want to take a screenshot of those players that we just showed, post it on your IG story. Make sure you tag me. If you do that, I'll share it on my IG story this weekend.